Did you see an aeroplane crash during the Second World War?
No. Well,
Oh.
I was on the scene when two aeroplanes collided, a Hurricane and a Spitfire. One of them came down not more than less than a quarter of a mile, and the other one came down about 3 miles away, a place called Mountfield.
Mm.
Both pilots jumped out and parachuted down, had a nice cup of tea at some farm, and great excitement. School turned out. In orderly fashion, we marched up the road, and there was the big bloody hole in the road. It was still smoking, and we picked up bits and pieces before the police got there, and then they cordoned it off because it was dangerous. I mean, it took up a chunk out of the road, and it was terribly exciting. We never got that close to anything, and nobody was hurt. They just touched wings or something, and spun the aeroplane, just spin off like that. But of course, 3 miles is nothing because they were high up.
Did you see it?
3 miles apart.
Did you see them hit?
Eh?
Did you see them hit?
No, I didn't.
No.
No, of course not. I was in school,
Mm.
but we heard very quickly, amazingly quickly. And the privileged ones in school, I was one of them, were allowed to go out and have a look immediately. We almost ran the distance. With great excitement.
Did Yvette
Middle-class,
go and see it?
Hmm?
Did Yvette go also to see it?
Yvette?
Mm.
Well, no idea. She wouldn't have been around. She was in London.
So you saw Doodlebug also, didn't you? Not
Oh
was
yeah,
it?
lots of doodlebugs.
Mm.
I didn't see them crash and blow up and everything. Saw all that. When they came overhead, there were various routes from different bases in France. The doodlebugs were launched and Holland and so on. And we had one route right over our house. I told you that. That one that came overhead and I saw it crash and blow up. When that at night, when it was that route, we had to go under. We had a cellar, well, it was half cellar under the house. My father made it into a room where we could at least put some mattresses down, and we could lie down there. It was very awful there. It was only about that high. We had to crawl in this little door and then lie down because of the danger. And but then when it was, the other route was somewhere over Battle, about 4 miles away, and that was exciting because we used to see the what would happen was Doodlebug would be coming. Coastal Command, Fighter Command, was alerted. They'd scramble and take off. They'd attack the Doodlebug coming towards. They could not travel as fast as the Doodlebug. They go at it at an angle and shoot it. Now, if they didn't shoot it down, they missed it, and they go back to base. The Doodlebug would carry on, and then somewhere up in the world, the next one would scramble, and they'd come to intercept. Now that would happen somewhere over Battle, or what we could see along there. So we saw the aircraft at night. It was the best time, and nearly always it was at night. So you see the aircraft come, and pop, 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 and they had tracer bullets, so you could see all these things curving like that towards the Doodlebug. You could see the Doodlebug because of its jet. It had a ramjet on it. It was very crude. It was like a bomb with 2 brackets and a big cylindrical thing, very, very crude, that pop, 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 that terrible racket. You see them shooting at it, occasionally hit it. But of course that was entertainment. It wasn't going to, we were not in any danger when that, because that was 4 miles away down there, so it was, you used to watch it. So a little bit, you know, you had to go big. Yeah, we were never in any great danger. Not down there.
What about the doodle bug you saw crash or something?
Well,
Or
that was, that was a phenomenon. It shouldn't happen. The doodle bug had short, very square wings. What it was like, you know what a bomb is like, widen out like that. It was literally all bomb. And then a fuel tank in this cylinder, and then I told you, the cylinder ramjet on the top. So if you can imagine a sausage thing like that, and then on top here was two little stubby wings on either side, very unstable, but it went so fast that it was able to stay up. But as soon as you shot if they hit the ramjet, it was designed to just crash down like this. Well, this one didn't. It floated. You could hear it. It was only about 200 feet up. It came over, it was wobbling like that. The bloke coming towards me dived into the ditch. And then I heard this swish noise. Looked up, there's this black bomb, you know, just about a couple of 100 feet up.
Yeah.
It went along, and then there was a row of trees on a big little hill like that. It went just cleared that, got beyond it, and then bang, the whole thing went up. And that was the end of that doodle bug. Nobody was killed, but it was very near to two houses. One was made of brick, and the other one was made of wood, old Tudor beeson, you know. The brick one was very badly damaged, Georgian house. The other one, so the lady who lived in the other one said it bent, it came back and didn't do much damage to that one. I don't know, silly stories. But that was the nearest I got to copying it. That thing should have come down just about where I was.
It was very close.
Some freak wind must have just managed to let it glide.
You saw it gliding.
I've told this story to several people, and some of them I don't think believe me, because it wasn't supposed to be able to do that. But it must have been some freak thing that allowed it to happen. Because the wings were virtually just little square things. I'm a pilot, I know. You have to have a big wing to hold something up and float. It wasn't designed for that, it was designed to kill. It was a horrible, horrible thing. Hitler was not a nice person, I think. It was not the first time that civilians have been included in a war deliberately, because they did in the First World War, but nothing like to the extent in the Second World War. Civilians were fair game to that bastard Hitler, and so then we retaliated in the same manner and killed a lot of Germans. Not nice, not a nice situation. Hello, light of my life. Where's my supper then? You have not made my supper.
No, I'm going to start on it now.
Well, I found a nice little cob, and I'm feeling quite pleased with myself. But now I've got to try and get there.
I've got to find something a bit warmer to put on.
You're all décolleté.
Well, I didn't want, as I just said to Xavier, I'll probably turn out it's black this time.
And what about VE Day?
The what?
VE Day. What do you remember about VE Day?
VE Day? Not a lot. I remember, well, like that photograph, I remember that. Had a party outside and flew a British flag. It was quite pretty patriotic. But I mean, it was just a bit of fun. I know we knew it was over, the war, really. It was just a matter of mopping up. But the moment when they said, well, now hostilities have ended, was a great, obviously after 5 years of that. But then, of course, came the aftermath. Everything was the same as usual, rationing, and so on and so on. But men were not being killed anymore. And that, of course, was an enormous morale booster. But they were still being killed in Japan. The war in Japan wasn't ended for about another year. And the Americans shut the atom bomb down, 2 atom bombs. And that ended, that killed a lot of Japanese. The Japanese never forgiven the Americans for that. But what could the Americans do? She was only a bug off.
So how did you know it was the end of the war?
Close on the radio.
Have some cauliflower cheese?
Yes, I will.
We used to listen to the news a lot during the war, get the latest news. So, anyway, we'd have known, but it would like wildfire. Neighbour would hear the news, and run out of the house and shout to their neighbours and so on. It was good fun time. People were much friendlier and helped each other. That was the difference. Now everybody hates each other. During the war, it was the complete opposite. People were helpful. Nobody would do dirty tricks or anything like that. Mrs. So-and-so did. No, about a quarter of a mile away, we'd come down the road, stop outside the house, and going into battle, I've got a bit of petrol. Can I get you anything, or do you want to come? Neighbours would stop. Nobody would go with an empty car. If they could pick up some people, they would take them 3 or 4 miles to battle and then do the shopping, then come back in. And she used to take me sometimes. I used to ask my mother, and I could go, and just for the ride, as a kid, and to go in a car. Oh, it was a great thrill. I loved going in the car. I knew how to drive when I was 10. My father let me have a go when I was about 12 on the Romney Marshes, quite near Ebed, where Ebed is now. I remember that. He said, come on, there's no traffic around. We're glad to go. So I drove along there, and you could see for half a mile ahead. These roads were zigzagging across the marshes, and quiet, and the wall, there was hardly any traffic at all there. And I drove for a couple of miles, It was a great thrill. Father loved it, the marshes. Particularly where he lives, he loved that part more than any, I think. Because I used to go with him. The others didn't. It was always me. We used to go out there together and spend half a day or even a day sometimes, just mooching around, going from the villages, looking at all the old churches and that. And he used to take me out. We used to go to a lot of these old houses. They would give you tea and scones or something like that. So you'd go in and have tea and cakes, and he'd take me home. That's when you could get a bit of petrol. Towards the end of the war, you get a bit of petrol. And just after the war. You just go bike rides. Go quite a long way on a bicycle when I was very small. to the bicycle. Bicycles were far more common in the war, as you can imagine. People didn't have any petrol. Everybody had a bike. I had a nice childhood.
What about the fish shop and the bomb?
The what?
Fish shop and the bomb. Fish shop and the bomb. Your dad went and
Oh, yeah.
liked fish or something. What was?
We went up in London, in Soho, and he was going to go to this fish shop, but he passed a bookshop and could never resist second-hand books. And so he stopped browsing with the books. And while he was just looking at the book, W2, a rocket, came down and hit the fish shop he was going to. Now he would have been in that fish shop because if they had not stopped to look at the books. The W2 had no warning at all. You heard it after it had gone off because it travelled so fast. The sound was faster than sound when it came down on the ground.
Did you hear them?
Eh?
Did you hear them?
Did he what?
Did you hear them?
No, I wasn't in London. I was in the
Oh,
country. They didn't,
okay.
it was only London they went for. That was really nasty, and at the end of it was a very nasty thing. Hitler got what he badly deserved in the war.
Actually, he didn't get what he deserved. He got away with it by pulling the trigger on himself. He should have been
You think he should have been tried?
tried and executed.
Yeah, they probably would have got off.
Oh no, he wouldn't have. I mean, his
You
right-hand
know,
man-
Goering. They got him.
Mm.
They condemned him and all that, but they say it was an American sergeant or lieutenant. I think a lieutenant something or other gave him the cyanide fire, and so he didn't have to face the indignity of hanging. Now that wasn't that lieutenant or sergeant, whatever he was. Well, I mean, where would he got this cyanide in the first place?
Yes.
He was an ordinary Joe doing his job, guarding the his outside cell, taking any chances with that bastard. But it was from higher up. He wasn't going to suffer that indignity, and the same would have happened with Hitler. Believe me, these leaders, when push comes to shove, they won't do that. He had to die because the public would have been outraged,
Yeah.
but they wouldn't have taken him out and hanged him.
See, they should have made sure he was hung.
Oh yeah.
And
He had to
what
die.
stories
Yeah.
did your father tell you about the First World War? What? Any
The what?
The First World War.
Well, a lot of stories from. I remember some of them, but I don't remember all of them. I tried to get him to write them down, but he never would. But he didn't mind the amusing ones, but he didn't like talking about the nasty things.
He threw gas at the Germans, and
Well,
he threw gas at the Germans.
look, when he went in, he joined up, and he didn't know anything at all about the army or war or anything. And he had a nasty shock, as they all did when they met the sergeant. And they called out, has anybody any education in chemistry? And my father had. I mean, he wasn't a qualified chemist or anything like that, but he quite advanced in chemistry. And stupidly he said yes. Afterwards you learn that you don't ever volunteer for anything. So he was then taken aside and told that he was going into that unit in the Royal Engineers to gas. He had no choice. That was it. So he was in the trenches with the gas. and he saw more men die, British soldiers die, than ever they did the Germans. That was the daftest thing under the sun. They were given a piece of cloth. They didn't have gas masks. They hadn't made the gas masks. They weren't supposed to use gas, but I don't know. Germans, I think, used it first, so the British retaliated, and that happened. And he used to put this thing over his face like a handkerchief or something, to go around and tuck into the tunic, and he would not take it off. And he was suffocating on this flannel. It was horrible. It was chemicals on it. And chlorine, they saw men frothing at the mouth. They tore it off because they couldn't breathe. And then they got the chlorine. There was mustard gas. It was another, and it was. Well, he never really talked about it. It was so horrendous.
Right, yeah.
And then he said, there could be water in the trenches that deep, 10 inches, 10 inches deep, and men leaning against the slime of the mud on the trenches, actually are standing up with their rifle asleep, because they'd been, there was nothing. They would just use
They were cannon fodder, that's all it was.
In most inhuman conditions. And that was his rude awakening. I mean, before that he was a sort of starry-eyed youngster. And join up the army, and suddenly you find yourself, it was supposed to be over in 3 months. You say, there'd be nothing this war. They can't afford to have a long war. 4 years later they found out you could afford to. The Germans went bust, that's why they lost the war. It was the economics.
And meeting Duke.
What?
Meeting Duke.
My mother?
Yes. Yeah, in France.
Yeah, well, my father liked France and he liked the French, and he would always strike up a conversation with them. He met my father sitting on the bank of a river fishing. He went over and talked to him. He was always practising his French, you see. And my grandfather invited him round for lunch because they were very, up in that area of Pas-de-Calais, were very Anglophile, they liked him. So he invited him for lunch. And it was funny because he was invited for lunch, and in France they would say, à midi, but he didn't think he'd understand à midi, midday, come at midday. He said à 12 heures, which is 12 o'clock. The French don't normally say that. So my father thought he said à 2 heures, 2 o'clock, so 2 hours late for lunch. Now that in France is absolutely unforgivable, to be late for eating. I mean, anything else, 2 hours, nothing. But eating, you've got to be there, because if you spoil the meal. And they were very offended when you turned up 2 hours late. And then, of course, it was explained, because they found it terribly funny. And I think they finished up eating sandwiches or something like that. And, of course, he met my mother, and that was it.
So they must have forgiven him.
Oh, yeah. It was a long fiancé affair. What's the word?
Engagement.
Yeah, but what they say, affianced or something in French. Anyway, every time my mother, he never ever alone with me. Absolutely out of the question. And she had a younger sister who was about 11 years or 12 years of age. And she was detailed to always be there. And if my father was talking, he might sort of go like that. She would immediately be looking at him. And when they went out, she walked behind them. And she was a real little tyrant. This girl should be told, he mustn't this, he mustn't that. She didn't know what it was all about, obviously, but...
Yeah.
Taunt who?
It was some, what?
Taunt.
What?
Taunt who? Who was the...
Well, my father and mother might go out for a stroll, you see, as young Edwardian lovers do, and and the little girl would have to go
Who
with
was the
him.
little girl though? What was her
It's
name?
her sister.
Taunt
Denise.
Denise.
Denise, yes.
Oh, yes.
She was... There were two Denises. One was my cousin, and the other one was my mother's sister. So you had Tante Denise and Little Denise. Petite Denise, as they called them. But you don't... They're formal in France.
Didn't your mum have a sister called Alice?
Yes, that's right. And Little Denise was her daughter.
And
It's
it
very
wasn't
complicated.
Elise with an E.
Well, you want to know all this for?
Oh, I'm just interested.
Well, what you must do is get in contact with Nanu in France. She speaks English, and she'd know all the family, and she's a very nice girl. I mean, I
Actually-
haven't girl. She's a woman. Very
You've
old.
got the photograph. You've got photographs of that family tree.
Yeah, you've got
So
them
you
all
should be able
down.
to see it.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about the picture. You know that picture by the big French door with the Jack Russell?
Yes.
I thought that was Taunt Alice.
Yes, that's right. Don't you?
Because when I talk to Yvette, she says Taunt Elise with an E.
No. Alice. Alice, like Alice in
Yeah,
Wonderland.
Alise.
A-L-I-C-E, yes.
That was your mother's sister.
Yeah, it was my mother's elder sister.
Yes.
And actually, she was nice.
How many sisters did she have?
Two, Denise and Alice. She had one brother called Louis, who was in the French army. I'm not sure what. I think the Germans got him in the end. Captured him. He was all right.
Captured
Survivor.
him.
But they never actually met the Germans. Well, not in the First World War, but in the Second World War, of course, they were there all the war. It's the Germans right now.
And where did your mum and mother and father get married?
Where?
Yeah,
In Calais.
in Calais.
As soon as they possibly could at the end of the war. And then he took her to England and went back to university. And which of course had interrupted. I don't know. They gave a sort of grant to him. But it was very little. But to finish his education, he moved south and gradually.
What school did he teach at? Because he was.
Well, it was just an ordinary school. He never got on to higher education or anything like that, but he taught music as well. And of course, he made quite a lot of money. In those days, people wanted their kids to learn, and so he taught violin and piano, and he made a little orchestra, and used to go in for competitions and all that. And before the war, money was... Well, he made more money at that than he did with his job. And being a teacher, they had plenty of time, you know. And all these mums, they all wanted their kid to learn to play an instrument. And he knew, and he used to tell them that half of them were absolutely, would never be able to play. They just weren't musical, you know. But they insisted and they wanted it, and they said, please, you know, go on, we want, you know, perhaps he'll change. And,
He was too old for the Second World War, wasn't he?
oh yeah. Oh yes, but he still had to do fire watchings. He'd disappear, he'd have to go for a night, perhaps a school building or a government building, and they had to be on the watch. And if there were incendiary bombs, I mean, the Germans chucked them all over the place, the incendiary bombs, and they had to go and put them out, which was not very nice. But it wasn't all that, it wasn't particularly dangerous. I mean, if you really knew how, put sand on them or something, I think. But I know he frequently would be away. When the dangerous part in the war, it became less dangerous afterwards because the British Air Force, and when the Americans came in 1942, it changed things a lot. I mean, the Americans were an enormous asset, but they didn't necessarily win the war. I suppose they shortened it, but I don't know whether you could say they won it.
So what about my German grandfather? What do you know about him?
German one?
Yeah, my great
Well, I don't know
grandfather.
very much about him.
Well, what do you know? Well, what did your dad tell
Well, he
you?
was an engineer, a civil engineer.
I thought he was a surgeon.
What?
I thought he was a
No,
surgeon.
that was his father was a surgeon.
Yes.
His father was, he didn't come to England, I mean, he's in Germany. But, my grandfather came to England in the 19th century, I don't know when. But he didn't live to a very great age. I think he died when he was about 58. But my grandmother lived on for a long time. I think she died during the war, First World War. Because long before I was born, so I never knew them.
Mm.
She was Yorkshire. You see the family in the 1901 or something census, and Toady got it off the internet and printed it out. They've got the family there where they were and who they were in there. It's in that stuff I gave you, in that envelope. I think it's in there.
Yeah.
You will look after that, won't you? You know where it is, don't you? Yeah. Because that's it, you know. His memoirs or whatever. That's all I've got. One of his friends, he had a friend there in the army, you know, he fouled up with him, and he was killed. He was shot. It had a terrible effect, and he said he can't carry on writing this story that he was writing. Well, he was writing his early experiences in the war.
Right, yeah.
And Yvette had that. I didn't. My father never told me it existed. I didn't know it existed. My elder sister pinched it because she was interested like you. And then she died, and Yvette just happened to have it. That's all. And when I saw that, I said, I want to read it. So she gave it to me, and I never gave it back.
She probably knows you've got it.
She does. She knows. Has she mentioned it?
No. I'm just saying she probably knows you've got it.
No, I don't think so. No, I think. Well, I should have it. I mean, it was the. I mean, she wasn't interested in it.
Yeah.
I mean, she kept all the photographs, and all the good ones she got. You'll get those. I made sure of that. I told her. I want those women getting it. I mean, they are very much a family, and no outsider should have any personal things like that. I'm going to tell you about that when I get down there. All the things they're in her custody. That's all. They don't belong to anybody. I mean, it's got to be kept in the family, and you are probably the. Well, you'll have to pass them on to the most suitable next one, which will be either Toady Sprogg or Piers Sprogg. Whichever one shows an interest. It would have to be your judgment on that. Not that it's anything special, but it is all we've got of the family, yeah?
What about when your mother was trying to get to see your father in the front line, and an officer stopped his car?
Well, then you know as much as I do. You just said it. They were trying to get to the front line, which they shouldn't have been. There was a convoy that came past.
What, your mum and your...
My mother and her mother. And for some reason they'd gone to see my father. Well, he was out there mucking the bullets, and the staff car came past and stopped and said, "What are you doing here?" And they said that they wanted to see my father. And out popped a general, British general, who said, "Get in the car, I will take you there and see what I can do." And he went there. It was just behind the lines, and went to the wherever it was, the headquarters or whatever, and he told them that to find my father. So he did. I was absolutely alarmed at this being brought back, and there was his fiancée and his mother-in-law, and that was a British. That did it was my grandmother. You know, the British were absolutely the top. They were real gentlemen, and no French general would ever have even deigned to stop, let alone, give an act of kindness like that.
Your father probably got a bollocking after that.
There, during the war. And that, they have a different mindset. So they waited, and he was put on sentry duty, and they went up, got him and hanged him. And that was crept up in the night, and he was found.
Well, you don't know.
Morning, hanged. What?
You don't know it was them?
Don't know it was them? Well, who else? That was the story anyway.
And the paper darts, the
other one
Chinaman.
was Tutor Eade, who was a sergeant, and apparently a very revolting man, and he became Home Secretary in Attlee's government. My father, when after the war, I can remember my father with the newspaper saying, "Good God, this Tutor Eade," because he had an unusual name. He was always writing letters, my father said, when he was very much disliked, and the story had it that they chucked him in the pond. The men had waylaid him and chucked him in the mud, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether that could have been true. But there were a lot of stories about him, and then he became Home Secretary in the Labour government. I mean, he might have been a good chap, who knows? But he certainly was not. He had disgusting habits.
And the paper dart.
A man of the people. What about the paper dart?
I always wondered how the paper dart stayed in the door, the Chinaman and the...
Well, I believe what it was, the old nibs, I mean, I used to do them when I was at school. We had scratchy, horrible things that were made of steel, and they were pointed, and they had a split down the middle so that they could expand and contract as you were supposed to do beautiful copper plate writing. A little hole, and then there were two little slits. Well, I'd have to draw it for you. And you could, with your fingers, you could bend it back. That would break off, and you'd have two viciously sharp points that were sticking out. Make a little out of paper. I don't know what you call it. Like a paper aeroplane, but it isn't. It's just four folds, like a pyramid. A little thing like that. You fix the nib in there, and if you throw it,
Yes, Frankie,
Have you got any pepper?
I have.
it will go in it will stick in wood. And that was the dart. And the sparrow, whatever it was, would pull it out and come, get on his finger like that. He'd take